Over the last week or so, as we celebrated and commemorated Simchat Torah, there are a few different memories that I wanted to share. One is from Erev Simchat Torah, as we danced and sang and yes, even rejoiced as we ended our cycle of Torah reading of our most sacred of texts and began that cycle once more. I cannot remember the song, but what I do remember is that a number of us were dancing on this upper bima when two little boys, including a first grader who had just received his tiny Torah at consecration earlier that evening, came to join us, a group of grown-ups moving around in our circle. They laughed and smiled with us, and we made sure that they didn't hit their heads on the railings, and it's one of my favorite times of year for exactly that reason. For I thought to myself, this is what it's all about. This is the definition of Lador Vador, from generation to generation. Yet, even before that, you may or may not know that about a week prior to consecration, the students and their families always gather to talk a bit about what they're doing and why in celebrating this milestone in their Jewish education. Part of the program involves the parents helping to take out one of the Torah scrolls and enwrap it around the children, literally surrounding it in its ancient tales and teachings. If they're going to receive a baby Torah, the students may as well see the real deal. We also try to point out a few of the key stories and passages and to teach them about the different accoutrements that make up a Torah scroll, such as the eitzim, the handles, the parchment, the ink, the yad, and so on. Outside of the sweetness of seeing the students' faces light up and their eyes become wide as they take a look around and help to dress and undress the scroll, the very best part is the questions they inevitably have. My favorite from this year was, does the Torah have a birthday? For their rabbi, for those students too, I hope these experiences were true joy and pure profundity from the mouths of babes. It's one of those moments that makes this rabbi's heart sing, to be standing with these children as they discover the joys of Torah and celebrate being Jewish, bli neder, with no conditions or pretenses. They're simply allowed to be, and we are simply there to embrace them. For joy, these stories teach us at its baseline is a Jewish religious obligation, as many of the readings and rituals of our tradition instruct. Ivdu et Adonai besimcha, bo lefanav birnana, the psalmist writes, serve God with happiness, come before God with joy. So if we are to come before God, we might glean, we're to do this like our children without hesitation, with a smile on their faces, fully and open-heartedly. That stretch of a week spanning Sukkot until Simchat Torah, which we just spoke of, is known as Zman Simchatenu, the time of our rejoicing. After the heaviness of Yom Kippur, in which we lay our souls on the line and reflect and repent, Zman Simchatenu comes along to release us and force us to focus on the present. It eases the burden of our spiritual and physical vulnerability whilst dwelling in the temporary booth structures as we surround ourselves with family, friends, and guests for 7 or 8 days, finding ourselves more joyful as we're buoyed by their love. Tonight, as we farewell Shabbat and welcome in the new week with Havdalah, we'll chant the words from the book of Esther, La Yehudim Haita Ora, V'simcha v'sason v'ikar. For the Jews there was light, joy, gladness, and honor. It seems then that happiness is inherently linked to the way that we as Jews are meant to view the world and conduct ourselves in it. I remain intrigued by this concept of Jewish joy. Of course, there are moments in our lives that are unfiltered joy as Jews. Standing under the chuppah with a wedding couple, welcoming a new baby into the people of Israel, delighting in the goats on Yom Kippur with our families, being on camp in the summer full stop, celebrating with our B'nai Mitzvah students after their incredible hard work. Nonetheless, Kohelet, which we read at Sukkot, will poetically state that there is a time for everything under the sun. It says, et livkot ve'et lischok, et svod ve'et rekod. There is a time for weeping and a time for laughing, a time for wailing and a time for dancing. We'll return to this, but even this small excerpt acknowledges the reality that we do not feel happy all the time. In fact, we can and do go through periods of profound anger, sadness, depression, anxiety, grief, and so on throughout our lives. And if we didn't, we wouldn't be human, Kohelet is saying. So how is it possible for joy to be commanded? Our parashah this week, Noach, may also have its own lessons to share about Jewish joy. After 40 days of ever-rising floodwaters, Noah, his family, and all the animals, they have experienced this in the ark, and Noah sends a dove to see whether the waters have decreased from the surface of the earth. At first, the dove cannot find a landing place to rest, so it returns to the ark, and Noah knows that it is not yet time to emerge. After another week, he sends the dove out again, and this time it returns with alei zayit taraf, a plucked off olive leaf. And Noah understands that the ground was now drying, now that vegetation could be seen. So the dove may be representative of joy as hope. The symbol of peace, the dove and the olive branch in our time are almost universally acknowledged as the heralding of a world that is safe and secure for all of us, and may that time come speedily in our days. Our Midrash subsequently likens Israel to the dove, for just as the dove brought light to the world by gifting Noah the olive branch and with it its oil, so too are we expected to kindle lamps before God. As such, hope and joy are interlinked as we contemplate how we can be these lights and are encouraged to spread this light in turn. This joy and hope are intermingled because they express an optimism for the future. Through God's instruction that we must kindle lamps in our own day and age, the expectation is that these acts of goodness, this light we spread, will continue, that the people who perform them will be good, and that even after destroying the universe and resetting it, God has faith that there is a Jewish future that is bright because of them and because of us too. Relatedly, the dove that Noah sends may teach us that Jewish joy is linked to a sense of higher purpose. The Talmud then asks as to why the dove returned with a plucked olive leaf in its mouth. Why did it have to be specifically described as plucked? It could have been, for example, described as just an olive or a branch or just the leaf in and of itself. The rabbis then imagine a conversation between the dove and God in which the dove says, "Sovereign of the universe, let my food be even as bitter as the olive leaf, but direct from your hand, and not from the hand of a mortal man, although it may be sweet as honey." In other words, the dove would rather take its chances. It would certainly be easier to get food from humans, and it would likely taste better. However, for the dove, it was ultimately going to feel more rewarding if it meant experiencing a closer relationship to the divine, if it saw the forest for the trees, so to speak. Like our children and like the dove, joy is reiterated as knowing oneself to be part of a greater whole and finding fulfillment and greater satisfaction therein. After the dove comes the rainbow, representative of confidence and reassurance after the freefall of the flood. The Hebrew word for rainbow, keshet, also means a bow and arrow. Yet the 13th century scholar Hizkuni notes that in this scenario, the bow of the keshet appears with no arrow to serve as a sign of reassurance to those who beheld its glory. This was not a symbol of malice or an omen of further bad to come or another warning of sorts. It was instead representative of a two-way vote of confidence, with the rainbow being equally symbolic of the covenant between God and humankind, There's the vote of confidence from God, who trusts us with the earth to care for it and for each other, and as humanity begins from scratch to take the second chance and turn this new beginning into something better and brighter than before. There was also, I'd suggest, a vote of confidence from us too, that if we're going to take the very best of what God teaches us, including joy, that we're going to be okay and that everything is going to work out just fine. So for our consecrants, if you're wondering about the answer to their fantastic question, asked so confidently and self-assuredly, I told them that for the Torah's birthday, there was a couple of ideas. One was Rosh Hashanah, as the anniversary of the creation of the world with the Torah as its blueprint, or perhaps Simchat Torah, which we were going to mark together as we ended one Torah year of reading and began the next. And by the way, when I told them this story, my brilliant colleagues then pointed out that I'd missed a third option, Shavuot, Zman Simchatenu, the festival at which we received the Torah. This question, in other words, so simple and sweet in its innocence, and the joy in which the children asked, were also likely deeper than they could have anticipated. It spoke to their confidence and curiosity in exploring their big Jewish ideas, their hopefulness that they would find out new things and be part of the unfolding adventure, and certainly spoke to their sense of being part of something bigger than themselves. They knew that their Torah, their Judaism, their Jewish identity had purpose. It made them truly joyful, but there was nothing simple about it. We can then come to understand that our tradition and our texts do not pretend that the path to joy is easy, and that despite it being a commandment, it doesn't mean being happy 100% of the time. With that, I would like to conclude with a final memory involving Torah from this past Tuesday night, as our community gathered with Yaron and Jackie Vital. They're the parents of Adi Vital Kaploon of blessed memory, a dual Canadian-Israeli citizen who was murdered on October 7. Yaron, Jackie, and Adi Zichrona Livracha are also the cousins of our cantorial soloist, Lindy Rivers. As many of you will have seen by now, over the High Holy Days, we dedicated a beautiful new Torah mantle in Adi's Shem Tov, her good name, lovingly hand-sketched and hand-stitched by our talented congregant Jody Bager, including the words of Kohelet, Et Svod ve'et Rekod, a time for weeping and a time for dancing. At the conclusion of the evening, Jackie and Yaron were presented by Jody this Torah mantle designed in their daughter's honor. There was barely a dry eye in the Mishkan as they held that scroll tightly, surrounded by their Canadian family, and Lindy led us in Eitz Chaim Hi, it is a tree of life. In this emotional moment, it was a reminder for us to live exactly as we had heard that Adi would have wanted, with purpose and with joy. This is the lesson in what I have come to believe Jewish joy to be, crying with one eye and dancing with another, laughing with another, as our history and tradition have taught us to navigate the hardest and happiest of times, with joy to be found not in a perpetual good mood, but in what grounds us in life, including Torah and including community. We remember that the dove took several days to return to its companions and did not initially bring good tidings before it was safe to land and to eat from the hand of God once more. We remember that the rainbow only appeared after the chaos of the flood. It is only then that the sun's light became strong enough to make the rainbow shine. Et livkot ve'et lischok, et svod ve'et rekod, a time for weeping and a time for laughing, a time for wailing and a time for dancing, a time for rain and a time for the rainbow. Shabbat shalom.